لقد كان لكم في رسول الله أسوة حسنة لمن كان يرجو الله واليوم الآخر وذكر الله كثيرا.
All praise be to Allah, the most merciful, the most compassionate, and peace and blessings be upon our Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. I'm honored to welcome you to this episode of your program With the Prophet. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make us with the Prophet in this life by following his steps and be with him in the day of judgment in paradise. Again, we'll continue our talk about some of the characteristics of leadership that the Prophet ﷺ assumed in the best way and made him the greatest man ever to walk in earth. Like people like Thomas Carlyle call him hero, the hero of heroes, and Michael Hart would list him as the most influential person in history. Anyway, in this episode we'll be looking at one of these characteristics, exemplified in his trustworthiness, his truthfulness, his honesty and integrity, alayhi salatu wassalam. That was even known for him or about him before his mission, to the extent that his people around him that he has lived with for more than 40 years would call him As-Sadiq al-Amin, the truthful and trustworthy. They would entrust him with their own belongings, with their own money. That time there were no banks to save your money there or your valuable belongings, and they would give them to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Anyway, we'll just look at some incidents in his life where these characteristics were reflected. No wonder he was the one who would say to his companions and his sayings, "Alaykum bis-sidq, fa-inna as-sidqa yahdi ila al-birr." I advise you to be truthful, since truthfulness leads to righteousness, and righteousness leads to paradise. And the person continues to be truthful until he will be named by Allah the truthful. In the Battle of Badr, with the Prophet ﷺ hadn't planned this battle at all. And the Qurayshis came from Mecca. They were planning to fight against the Prophet. More than 1,000 people, armed to the teeth. The Prophet ﷺ was having 300 people. Very few among them were ready to fight. Very few were horsemen, and the rest were walking on their feet. On the way to the place of Badr, the Prophet ﷺ met with Hudayfa ibn al-Yaman and his father. And he needed everybody to fight with him. He met Hudayfa and I said, "You're going to join us?" He said, "Yes, indeed, O Prophet of Allah. But I want to tell you something. The Qurayshis met me on the way when I was coming to you, and they tied us, me and my father. And they said, we will not free you unless you promise that you will not fight with Muhammad in this battle." So we promised them. We didn't know that a battle was taking place. What do you think of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam? He said, "We don't break our promises even in the most difficult times that we have. Although we need you to fight with us, but since you have given a promise to the non-believers, we fulfill our promises even in the most difficult times." This is one incident. When the Prophet ﷺ arrived at Medina, he realized that the community there in Medina was made of different tribes, with people of different religious backgrounds. Among them were the Jews of the Medina, Bani Qurayza, Bani Qaynuqa, Bani Nadir. All those people were within the Medinan community. So the Prophet ﷺ felt that there should be a treaty, a pact, an agreement among these communities so they would live in peace with each other. They would know their rights and their duties. So that was the first constitution written in history which safeguarded the rights of different parts of the community. The Jews signed with the Prophet ﷺ that treaty that all of them will work together to protect Medina towards any outside invasion. And everybody will be having the freedom to practice their own religion in the way they want to. If they want to accept Islam, they are most welcome, and they will be given the freedom to do so. If they don't want to, they keep their religion. Unfortunately, the Jews violated that many times, and the Prophet ﷺ continued keeping his promise and the treaty that he had with them until the last moment. And they continued violations of the treaty of the Constitution of Medina. The Prophet ﷺ had to deport them of Medina and send them into exile, although he continued keeping his promises to them. And the Prophet ﷺ listed breaking one promises to be one of the practices of the hypocrites. Those people who break their promises have a feature or a characteristic of hypocrisy that should be avoided, that a true believer shouldn't really have that. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned in the Quran, and this is why when the Prophet ﷺ spoke about himself, he said, أَدَّبَنِي رَبِّي فَأَحْسَنَ تَأْدِيبِي. My Lord educated me, brought me in the best way, educated me in the best way. Where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, all who believe, fulfill your promises. And this is a practice of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, that you and me and every true believer, every follower of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam should really take in consideration. We shouldn't break our promises within the family, outside the family, with the communities that we live, to Muslims, to non-Muslims, it doesn't matter. These are principles that we live with, that the Prophet ﷺ lived with and set the best example in that. And I'll just give you an example that I had in life. A non-Muslim wanted to know about Islam. And when he came to this country, he signed a contract in his country with a certain amount of money paid as a salary and other privileges that he was supposed, allowances that he was supposed to have. When he came here, the manager of that company said, I cannot give you that salary, it's too high. He said, but you signed this contract with me in my country. He said, yes, we realized that we cannot do it here. Anyway, he met with me. He said, you claim to be Muslims and good people, treating people well, etc. And look what those people said to me. I said, you take this copy of the Quran, you bring it to your employer, and ask him to read this ayah, this verse in the Quran. And the verse was, يَا أَيُّهَا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا أَوْفُوا بِالْعُقُودِ. So he went to his employer. He said, you claim to be a Muslim? He said, yes. He said to him, do you believe in Allah? He said, yes. He said, do you believe in this book? He said, yes. He said, do you follow the teachings of this book? He said, yes. He opened to the page and he read it to him. All people, fulfill your promises. أَوْفُوا بِالْعُقُودِ. Fulfill your contracts. The man was astonished. He said, now what are you going to do? He said, I'll fulfill my promise. That man immediately became Muslim on the spot without asking about any other teaching of Islam. This is our religion that we live by. These are the characteristics of our Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam that we need to put into practice. This is a way of life. You know, our religion is not confined to the mosque. Actually, even the word religion does not describe Islam, because the people look at the religion, the relationship between you and God, in the synagogue, in the church, in the temple. No, It is a way of life that goes with you in your work, in your relationship with Muslims, non-Muslims, relationship with your family members, with the people that you work with, the people who work under you, to the company or the institution that you work with. These are aspects in the life of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam that made a difference. Realize people around him, though they might wage enmity against him, war against him, but they never accused him of being dishonest or a liar or untrustworthy. Yes, you and me having him as our role model that we need to follow. May Allah guide us to practice what the Prophet ﷺ practiced and take him as our true role models in all aspects of life. May Allah forgive me and you and guide me and you to the best and make us among the true followers of Prophet Muhammad ﷺ. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
لقد كان لكم في رسول الله أسوة حسنة لمن كان يرجو الله واليوم الآخر وذكر الله كثيرا.